Hi everybody, this is the Baseball Head, the amazing, spectacular, terrific, the great one, the People's Champion. Your host, the Head, and welcome back to the Baseball Head 2. I hope you like this video. Hit that subscribe button. So we're having a lot of fun here, believe it or not, talking about the media. And that's what we do here at the Baseball Head, amongst many things. And with Baseball Head 2 and the Baseball Head 3. But we have something that I think is interesting. It's sort of the way back machine. This is to the Mike Francesca WFAN days. And what he has to say about an interview that he did many years ago with Alex Rodriguez, a.k.a. A-Rod. Now, your host was a big fan of Alex Rodriguez. It really was. I wanted the Mets to get him after the 2000 season. I thought he was the right fit for the right team, and the Mets just didn't do it. They didn't want to spend the money, and they gave themselves all kinds of excuses not to do it. And to me, I don't care about all this drama that's happened since then. Obviously, over the last 15 years or so. I don't care about that. I never cared about that stuff. And I watched him, waste his time with the Yankees. And to me, that's wasting time. He should have been, if there was a player that should have been a Met, that was him. And then now, at least I got some of that sort of, I always thought that A-Rod was like the perfect New York Met. He was going to be a Met, and that was it. Very much the same way as Juan Soto. Juan Soto in 2021, I said, man, he's going to be a Met one day. And sure enough, that happened. If we had Steve Cohen as owner, Alex would have been a Met. We've been talking about a former New York Met, Alex Rodriguez, and his being quoted as a liar. But anyway, this is from Awful Announcing. Mike Francesca knew there was a good chance Alex Rodriguez was lying in an infamous interview. All I could do was ask the question. I asked it on multiple occasions that day. Okay. Mike Francesca gave Alex Rodriguez the platform to vehemently deny using PEDs, but wasn't ignorant of the fact that the New York Yankees third baseman could be lying. One of the wildest interviews in the history of Francesca's reign on Afternoon Drive came in November 2013. When Alex Rodriguez stormed out of his grievance hearing over the 211-game suspension he received for violating MLB's drug agreement and went straight to WFAN's studio. With Francesca live on WFAN and the Yes Network, Rodriguez repeatedly denied using any PEDs that would have garnered him the historic suspension. Now, his name came out again, I guess in 2007, 2008, 2009, something like that he had failed a test. And nobody was supposed to know about that test. And he got smeared. And there were other players that failed tests. He was one of them, and David Ortiz was. And David Ortiz, let me tell you, how is he in the Hall of Fame if he failed a PED test? But A-Rod's not. A-Rod was a better player than Ortiz ever could possibly be. Bullied him. More than a dozen years later, Francesca was asked whether he felt Rodriguez was lying at the time. I didn't know. I thought there was a very good chance. Yes. But I asked the question like 10 different times, and I implored him. I said, listen, this is going to follow you forever. You don't tell the truth. And he didn't. He didn't tell Katie Couric the truth. He didn't tell me the truth. We know that. We know how it unfolded. That day, did I know one way or the other? I didn't know for sure. No. How would I know? All I could do is ask the question. And I asked it on multiple occasions that day. From Francesca, were you guilty of any of these charges? A-Rod said this. No, and I shouldn't serve one inning. Mike Francesca, did you do anything wrong? No, A-Rod said. Did you do any PEDs? Francesca said. I'm trying to do my best here because the computer's freezing on me. No, A-Rod said. Rodriguez had already admitted to lying about PED usage early in his career. And just as he was lying to Katie Couric during the 2007 60 Minutes interview about his PED usage, he lied to Francesca during this 2013 interview on WFAN. After insisting he was innocent to Francesca in November 2013, he ended up his litigation against base with the following February and began serving a season-long suspension. A-Rod has since admitted he made an ass of himself during the Francesca interview. Francesca, however, has maintained that he didn't take offense to Rodriguez lying during that interview. It wasn't just Francesca he lied to. Rodriguez was lying to the audience, to Major League Baseball, and its fans. Well, it's true. Regardless of whether Francesca felt Rodriguez was lying or telling the truth, this was an interview he could not pass. Now, this came up because Francesca was taking questions from the audience, and he answered this question. Now, like I said, I have sort of a jaded attitude, not a jaded attitude, but a sort of a different attitude towards A-Rod because I'm such an admirer of his talent. And he was the perfect fit for the Mets. And so I always had a sort of an affinity for him as a player. But A-Rod's very prideful. And the problem is he just couldn't admit that he was doing it. And he didn't need to, I don't think. But there's all kinds of rumors that he was always doing it. Jose Canseco, I think he said that he always did it from the moment he came into the league. But who knows? You know. The problem is with some of these players from the past is that these guys are such great talents in the game, and they're being, in a lot of ways, they should still be honored at the Hall of Fame. And you see real guys that are in there that weren't nearly half the players that A-Rod was, or Barry Bonds was, or Roger Clemens, and some of them have done it, you know, and some of them just aren't that good of a player, as good players. A guy that wasn't a very good player is in the Hall of Fame. Is Harold Baines. How's Harold Baines in the Hall of Fame? He was never the best player on his team. When you looked at him, he wasn't like an all-time player. He didn't have 3,000 hits. He bounced around from team to team. I mean, he really was a player. No one ever thought that he'd be a Hall of Famer. He was in the Hall of Fame. Another guy that I was surprised that got in the Hall of Fame, believe it, and that was Lee Smith. I was looking at his numbers earlier. Just for the hell of it. And his numbers, he had a couple of 40 saves, seasons in his career, but I never looked at him as a Hall of Famer. And to be honest, I never thought Billy Wagner was a Hall of Famer. But what Billy has is different. He's left-handed, and he throws very hard, and he didn't walk anybody. He struck out a lot of batters and had a very low ERA. And then there's some players I look at, like John Franco. John Franco, his ERA is lower than Lee Smith's. He had a lot of saves. He has the most saves of any left-hander in baseball history. He's down the Hall of Fame. And he doesn't get in because he didn't throw hard. But he was around a long time, you know. So there's a real inequity with Major League Baseball in terms of who gets treated well and who doesn't get treated well. Like I said, A-Rod, he failed the test. This was long before these other tests. But he failed this test because they were taking a sample test. He failed it. And David Ortiz failed it, but he's in the Hall of Fame. I also think that Ortiz, he scared the hell out of the writers, and he's sort of friends with them now. So I guess that's kind of a big reason he's in. So I think they're a little intimidated, scared shitless of him, of his background, and some of the people that he associates with. So I think they're a little scared of him, you know. And then there's other players that were just jerks, like say Jeff Kent, who was a jerk when he played to the fans and stuff. He got in at the oldest time. And then there are players like Albert Bell. Completely nuts. But he's a guy you'd want to have on your team because he'd run through a wall. And he'd run over Fernando Vina. You know. That's a guy you'd want to have on your team, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. And look how long Jim Rice took to get in the Hall of Fame. So there's a real inequity in how baseball treats its players. And look how poorly they treat Pete Rose. We know Pete did wrong and he should have been banned. But the fact that they couldn't let him get in the Hall of Fame. Terrible. So, that's the one thing that's different about baseball is there's real inequity amongst the great players, how they get treated. Some players who aren't great players get in the Hall of Fame, like Bill Mazeroski, God rest his soul. He gets in, but a guy like like I said, Keith Hernandez is still out there. He's not in there yet. Crazy. And Keith will get in when he passes. That's what's going to happen with him. Same thing they did to Dave Parker, by the way. Dave Parker, he was one of the best players in the 70s, and he gets in, then he dies. Don't want to see these players, get in after they're gone. It's just silly, You let me know what you think about this video, and of course, please subscribe to Baseball Hut 2, and I'll see you later.